Welcome to Black Belt Leader. I'm Karen Gately, founder of Corporate Dojo. On the show today, we're going to be talking about how you and your team can maintain resilience, especially in the face of endless change and challenge. There's no doubt maintaining energy, focus, productivity and healthy relationships gets tough, especially when people are struggling to keep up and keep going. So we've invited two guests to share with us what it means to be resilient and steps that you can take to get there and to guide your team to do the same. Our first guest is going to be Angela Boyd from Third Eye Consulting, and then following Ange, we'll be talking to Jackie Knight, a coaching psychologist, who will be here to share her views on how to build resilience and why it matters to success in an individual, team or business. So we'll kick off with Angela. Angela has been running her business, Third Eye Consulting, for a number of years and works with a lot of organisations to help them to improve their team effectiveness, their leadership capabilities, and has spent a lot of time in the change space. So welcome to the show, Ange. Really happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Karen. It's great to be here.
To kick off, would be it'd be helpful to start with understanding more about what resilience actually is. You know, it's something we hear about all the time. We need to be resilient, but what does that actually look like from your perspective?
In a nutshell, it's how quick we can respond and get back on our feet after something happens,
Yeah.
whether it's in the organisational space, personally, with a team member.
Yeah.
So, you get bombarded daily with things happening as a leader, and how quick you can actually deal with it and move on is a symbol of how resilient you are. And from an organisational perspective, with lots of change that happens, things happening in the media or branding or things dislodging you, it's how quick can an organisation bounce back.
And which, putting the martial arts hat on for a moment, that absolutely reminds me of that recovery rate. You might have copped a punch or whatever it might be, but can you actually then regroup, get our focus, keep moving forward?
Absolutely.
With strength. So, what are some of the things that you think hold people back from being resilient? What are some of the things that actually undermine their capacity to have resilience?
Absolutely. Well, we're human beings, and as we turn up to work every morning, there's stuff that we're dealing with in our private lives at home, and so noticing how we show up every day is really important, because that's what our team's seeing. I hear a lot where people say, look, my leader is just all over the place and creates a lot of disruption because of their state. So it's really important to notice how you're showing up and to sort of have your daily practices so that you can turn up to work every day and be the best you can be to lead a team to be the best they can be.
Absolutely agree with that. Time and again I see a leader's lack of confidence. I see a leader's drained spirit start to actually undermine the rest of the group's confidence and belief that we can actually get through this.
Absolutely.
So, again, when it comes to creating a resilient environment and a resilient culture and organisation, what are some of the things that you've seen work and actually make the biggest difference?
I think with I work a lot in the change transformation space and there's so much happening, and I think that prioritising what's happening is really important. I often see there's like so many conflicting projects and initiatives going where people just don't know where their energies lie. They're scattered, their practices are all over the place, and they're not doing anything well. So the first thing I would be doing is prioritising what you're doing. Even as a leader, and I know that we all want to get so much done, but it's being mindful of what energises versus what destabilises people, and looking at that from both a team perspective, a function perspective, and then the whole organisation.
Absolutely. In my experience, that prioritisation exercise can in of itself be a little bit challenging. One of the things I recommend to leaders is to decide what we're not going to do. Because again, it's very easy to put lots of things on the list, but what are the things we're actually going to leave off? So we're actually creating reasonable bandwidth that we can actually start to deliver on some of our priorities.
Definitely.
So what are some of the things that you have seen leaders do to re-energise or to get a team back to where it needs to be when they've been really struggling?
One of the ones that I absolutely love, because it gets such good feedback, is when leaders empower the teams. It's like, as the leader, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything yourself. It's like, how do you create that tribe, that sort of agile mentality to sort of share and divide and conquer. Get lots of people working on their strengths and their areas, and it's also a way to actually bring your talent, showcase your talent, give people experience of doing different things, and that way as a leader you're starting to create you're building capability, you're creating a culture which is about sharing rather than you're the leader, you're doing it all yourself. Because a lot of the leaders that I work with, they've got too much on their shoulders. It's like, how can you sort of share the load? And that means that their energy shifts because they're not weighed down by all this stuff that's happening. And their teams start going, thank goodness, someone's actually listening and wanting to know what I've got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, how do leaders in your experience manage to get out of their own way? Because that's what I've just heard you say. And, again, it's a conversation I have all the time. It's like, well, are you actually in service to yourself? Are you going to allow yourself to be successful because of your expectation or belief that you need to actually carry all of this load and 100%. Do all of the complex work, for example?
100%. I recently worked with a CIO who was in exactly that space, and getting a coach for him was the best thing. And why I say that is because he'd been working like 80% in operations and maybe 20% in strategy. And it wasn't until we started working together that we started to flip that over, because his time was spent in trivial stuff that wasn't actually delivering the outcomes. And he wasn't actually working with his team as effectively as possible. So for him, creating some new disciplines and some new daily practices, like clearing out his calendar, spending time on the things that matter, prioritizing, actually working as a leader rather than being in the jungle, in the operational stuff, was one of the biggest change that worked for him.
And look, and again, that's a fantastic example, because for a lot of the leaders that we work with, it's about helping them to actually get into the job that not only do they want to do, but they actually need to do. And that then creates discipline around, what do I let go, what do I genuinely empower people to move forward with. As you've said, sharing that workload across the team. It then creates, amongst other things, just the capacity to think. And in my experience, that's one of the reasons often we get to the place of burnout, and it's really challenging to come back, because we get to this place of overwhelm. So again, before we get to that problematic state, what's your advice to organisations who want to proactively build resilience? What are some of the steps that they can take to help their whole workforce, not just themselves, to actually build that capability?
It's a great question, because what I see a lot when I'm doing these sorts of reviews is that there's individual activities. There's a mindfulness session, or there's a massage, or there's a yoga session, but what's not working for people is that, how do you create the daily practice around that? And I think that's a different mindset. It's great to get the knowledge, and I think we all need to do that to get sort of like that awareness, but it's what you do with it. How do you integrate it into day to day? How do you integrate it into the culture? And some of the ways that you can do that sort of thing is to, as a team, as the leader of the team, you can start to encourage things like, in your team meetings, to have a mindful moment to talk about how people are feeling energetically. I do an energy survey where it's like, out of 10, how's everyone feeling today? And it just gets people connected more with how they're feeling, and to start taking ownership, because an organisation can only do so much. It's back to each and every one of us, and the leader's the start, right? So as a leader, you really have to be mindful of how you show up, your daily practices, being the role model, because if you're working long hours, working weekends, missing lunch, guess what? It's going to filter through. And I hear that a lot, is I don't feel like my leader gives me space to be able to do that. And so it's threefold. It's your leader, it's the culture, and then it's the organisation supporting that.
Absolutely agree. I wish I could remember who this leader was, because I read about it and I'd love to give them credit. But there was a leader who recently was talking about leaving loudly. And what they were talking about was demonstrating to the whole workforce that going home is actually an acceptable thing to do. And more than that, it's actually a desirable thing to do. Because if you are taking the time to re-energise your spirit, hang out with your family, rest your mind, nurture your health and well-being, then when you come back into the workplace, you're entirely more likely to be at your best. So this particular leader would make a big announcement about the fact that they were going, so that everybody, could again take that cue that this is what successful behaviour looks like. And I also know from personal experience that, maintaining that balance is fundamental to our mental strength, and, obviously resilience is a part of that. What's your your advice for a leader who is frustrated by people who are, they perceive, playing the poor me victim card? You know, so they're struggling to keep going, but the leader's observing them thinking, there's more in you, you know, you're choosing to see this view of the world.
That's a really good point. I think it's a fine line between inspiring people, empowering people, and playing and enabling them to be the victim.
Yeah.
And I think it's about being able to tap into their sense of well-being enough to say, actually have those tough conversations that are above the line, and to sort of draw them about what can you do about it. You know, how do you shift the ownership back to them? I think that's really important, because some people don't feel empowered. It's like they don't give themselves permission to actually take ownership, and they're looking for that magic bullet from either the organisation or their leader, and really it's a 50-50 a relationship. You have to take your own ownership. So as a leader, to be encouraging, to be that role model, to be loud sometimes and go, you know what, I think you can do better. And sometimes just having that real conversation can trigger that. You know, even shifting how you have meetings. One of the things that I find really works for some leaders is take them on a walk. Go on a walking meeting, do something different, do something that is actually a bit more relational, so you can create that relationship with them on a deeper level than just the transactionary.
Absolutely. And again, I totally agree that sometimes that tough love conversation is essential. And what I just heard you say critically, though, to make sure our viewers heard it loud and clear, is that it's delivered with respect and sensitivity. You know, that above the line behaviour is, it is respectful, it is compassionate, but it's absolutely honest about, you know, helping people to recognise what thoughts am I entertaining, you know, what thoughts am I actually allowing to impact the strength of my energy levels and therefore my capacity to keep going.
Absolutely, because emotional resilience is really important to keep in the back of your mind. Some people aren't there, and we all have different levels of that. So some team members might be quite low in their emotional intelligence and resilience, and which means that they can't bounce back, that they'll take longer to process, that they need to have those conversations in a more sensitive sort of delivery than someone who's perhaps a little bit more open to feedback and actually has that go-get-em sort of attitude. It's like, you know, bring it on, you know, and you can be really honest and direct. It's really understanding and knowing where they're at in their sort of levels.
And that's key, isn't it? Because what I'm really hearing us talk about now is that coaching relationship. How do we really get to know the people on our team, and what is their mental capacity? You know, how do they think? How do their emotions influence? And then having influential conversations around that.
Absolutely, because resilience, as we just said, it is personal, and then it's team-based and then organisational based. So we have to start at each of those points.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to finish our chat with you on an important question at this time of the year around maintaining social resilience. We've all got to go and hang out at Christmas parties and hang out with family members, etc. What advice do you have for our viewers around that?
One of the big ones is say no. You know, sometimes we get lots and lots of invitations, and it's not that you have to go to all of them. You know, I always encourage people to go to the ones that you really want to. You've got high energy around, because if you don't, you tend to just be showing up for no reason, and it's going to take your energy away. The second one is to actually be mindful of what you're eating and drinking. If you don't overindulge, it means you're not going to get that surprise hangover and those extra kilos. So that's like, you know, reduces the stress load. And probably the third one is to don't see Christmas or holidays as a time where you have to take your well-being and wellness out of the picture. It's actually a time to be more focused on you, to think about what is it that you need in that moment so that you don't burn out, and then be a smaller version of yourself over the holidays. It's like keep it active.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Thank you, it was terrific.
It's absolutely great to have Ange joining us. After the break, we're going to be joined by Jackie Knight. Jackie's going to share a bit more insight from her view as a psychologist and experienced coach about, again, resilience in the face of change and how we can build it. Hi, I'm Karen Gately, host of Black Belt Leader, and you're watching Tick Up.
Hi, I'm Laura D'Aquino, host of Lunchtime Express. You're watching Ticker.
This is Ticker.
Hi, I'm Ali Tarai, host of Future Sport, and you're watching Ticker.
Welcome back to Black Belt Leader. Joining us now is Jackie Knight. Jackie is a registered psychologist, an executive coach and an organisational consultant. She works with a diverse range of organisations and clients, including CEOs, executives, technical people, people leaders, individuals, all with a view to helping those people be at their best in the workplace. So Jackie, thanks so much for making the time to be here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, again, we've been talking about resilience. Really keen to understand from your perspective what you believe resilience actually is. What does it mean to be a resilient human? And then obviously we can explore how we untap that potential.
So the definition of resilience is actually quite complex, and I think there are many people that have dedicated their lives to researching this in a range of different areas. And I think like areas such as trauma, it's a word that we hear really frequently these days.
It is.
And I think that, to focus it for the purposes of this discussion, if we are talking about resilience at work and in the workplace, I think it is about being able to survive and thrive, ultimately, and not, suffer undue stress, so that people can't continue to kind of endure in their careers.
Absolutely. And come back from those setbacks, come back from those steps back for whatever reason, as Angela was talking about. Not everything is in our control. Sometimes there are surprises that come along and we need to obviously be able to deal with that. So what's your advice around building resilience? How do you think people can get mentally strong in that regard?
Yeah, I think that self-awareness is probably the number one bedrock around resilience. So understanding, our own, psychological organisation. What makes us, operate the way that we do. Tuning into our bodies. Taking cues from physical sensations and feelings.
And self-awareness is a fascinating space, isn't it? I was recently reading something about this, and they were talking about the research shows that something along the lines of 90% of us think we're really self-aware. It might even be higher. It's like 95% of us think that we are. And this particular research found that in reality it's like 10% of us that are self-aware.
Yes.
And that's self-awareness around my internal world. So my internal dialogue, my emotions is one aspect, and then obviously how we interact with the external world. So how can people grow that self-awareness? How can they, understand more about their thinking and their emotions and the flow and impact of that?
Yeah, I think, there are a range of, mediums available, and there's plenty of books on the market about self-development and adult development and growth, personal growth, spirituality, that kind of thing. I think listening is actually probably high up on the...
I love it.
People spend a lot of time, often particularly in corporate settings and meetings, while somebody else is talking, they're actually using the time to reload their barrels in order to respond.
Waiting for your turn to talk.
That's it. And so... listening and paying attention to not just what people are saying, but how they're saying it. I think that we get in workplaces particularly quite focused on the content. What are the tasks? What's the content? What's everybody actually talking about? and less attention is paid to the process. What's going on between people right now? How are we interacting?
What's the impact that's having?
How am I feeling? How am I responding right now? What do I notice? What am I aware of?
It's great that we're even having this conversation, because I remember, many moons ago, it was incredibly common for leaders to say, people shouldn't bring emotion into the workplace. They certainly shouldn't bring their baggage. My view is people don't step out of their home suit into their work one. They arrive as a human being. So sometimes it's life's challenges that is making it hard for us to be resilient at work. What is some of the advice that you give either individuals or leaders about dealing with that kind of scenario?
Yeah, look, I absolutely think that, authenticity and vulnerability that we hear a lot about these days, it's part of the whole self, and, you can't separate who you are at work and who you are in life, absolutely. I think that from the perspective of leadership, a couple of things. Allowing ourselves to be who we really are as opposed to who we think we should be is probably a helpful guiding thought. And also, from the perspective of whenever we're in leadership roles, because we're all leaders and we're all followers at different points in time, to be curious, to be calm, to be clear about what's expected, and to be kind.
And that leads me straight into the next question I wanted to ask you about, was that role of compassion, because again, for a lot of leaders that might feel soft. It might feel that sometimes people just need to toughen up, they need to dig deep, they need to keep striving, we pay them good money, they're well rewarded for this. In my view, when we're compassionate, we're entirely more likely to build trusting, respectful relationships, and then be able to help somebody. What do you see around that compassion space in terms of the extent to which it makes a difference?
Absolutely. I am a firm believer that kindness, compassion and love are the greatest tools that we have when it comes to getting the best out of people. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be held accountable and that there shouldn't be clear expectations around deliverables and behaviour. I think that should be very clear and transparent and spoken about, and the communication skills developed such that quality conversations can be had around that. But if people feel safe and people are comfortable and they feel cared for, then they're going to operate at their best. And you'll get the discretionary effort out of people, which in many businesses these days, that's the only thing that you have as a competitive edge.
That's right. And again, we focus on that extensively. How do you tap into that discretionary effort, which is fundamentally the stuff people do because they want to.
That's right.
And helping people to feel energised is a big part of that. And in my experience, again, managing our energy levels has a big influence on our resilience as well.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the big drainers? What are some of the things that take energy from people in the workplace that, again, undermine our efforts to be resilient?
It's surprising how a toxic culture and behaviours from others will actually cause an enormous amount of stress in people and a lot of rumination, interruption of sleep, anticipating how others in the workplace might behave, how the boss might behave. There's a lot of fear that exists in corporations, and I think that if that was addressed at a systemic level, rather than locating the problem and the solution at the individual level, with everybody needs to get more resilient. In some ways, at the systemic level, if some attention can be brought to, what kind of environment and culture are we truly creating here, as opposed to, what we say we're creating.
Absolutely agree. Because again, that environment can make a massive difference to people's sense of confidence, their belief in that future, the sense of being an important part of this team and having support, because we're all linking arms and heading in the same directions. Jackie, I think you've added some really great points to our conversation today, and really grateful for you being here.
Thank you.
So how can our viewers find out more about you and the work you do?
I guess my website probably.
Would you like to tell us what that is?
I think it's www.jackieknight.com, I think.
Jackie's clearly not using her website as her major marketing source.
Not really a great self-promoter, I've got to say.
No, that's fine. But clearly, obviously, our viewers will find you if they need to, as well as Angela Boyd, who joined us earlier as well. So thanks for joining us. Next time on Black Belt Leader, we're going to be exploring how you can manage workplace mental health issues, so extending on the conversation from today. So we're going to have two really skilled people in to talk to us about some of the strategies that you can put in place to make sure we are building environments that support mental health in your workplace. Again, if there are any topics you would like us to explore, please give us a call or get in touch via our website, which is corporatedojo.com, or again through our social media channels. Thanks for joining us, and remember, you choose. Will you be an ordinary or an awesome leader of people?
This is Ticker, your new source for news.